I want to talk Kyrie Irving, because at this point, this has become an international health story. All right. So Kyrie Irving is not playing right now. He is a player for the Brooklyn Nets. And reportedly, he is pushing back against these vaccine mandates. And he has people like Donald Trump Jr. on his side. So, according to a piece in The Athletic, they say this: multiple sources with direct knowledge of Irving's decision have told The Athletic that Irving is not anti-vaccine and that his stance is that he is upset that people are losing their jobs due to vaccine mandates. It's a stance that Irving has explained to close teammates. To him, this is about a grander fight than the one on the court. And Irving is challenging a perceived control of society and people's livelihood, according to sources with knowledge of Irving's mindset. It is a decision that he believes he is capable to make given his current life dynamics. One source said, quote, Kyrie wants to be a voice for the voiceless, unquote. What about the voiceless who have died of COVID? 866-801-8255. What are your thoughts on Kyrie Irving's stance? And he reportedly is not playing for the Brooklyn Nets at this point. I will say this, then I'll let you take it, Amisha. I did do a little bit of track when I was in high school. But what I do know, and I could be wrong, that when I think of the functionality of sports teams, when I think of the amount of money that someone like Kyrie Irving is making, and I think, isn't it about being a team player? Millions and millions of people have gotten this vaccine. How are you hurting your team by saying, I'm not going to play? How are you hurting it? And how exactly are you a champion, if this is true, by saying you could still be a champion and say, I'm vaccinated, I'm playing with my team, and I still think vaccine mandates are inappropriate. And if you as a sports star want to jump into that political public health lane, good luck. Good luck if you want to do that. But I just wonder, is it selfish, or is it selfish? Is it publicity? Or does he really sincerely believe that he is a champion for the, I guess, what is it now? 44% of Americans who aren't vaccinated? It's interesting. What are your thoughts on this, Amisha?
I like the question you posed because it's definitely selfish. It's ignorant. It is also not on par for the course for Kyrie Irving. This is a guy who has spread ignorance in the past. This is a guy who was a flat earther in 2021. This is a guy who is known for his antics off the court as much as he's known for them on them. And I feel like this was one of those moments that he took to get into a national conversation because he honestly just didn't want to take the vaccine himself. And his team and those who he's talking to, not his team in terms of athletics, but his team in terms of they're trying to create a PR spin here around some type of some type of personal mission to not feel like you have to be forced to do something. At the end of the day, we all know that the more people we have vaccinated, the safer that we are against COVID-19 and against the emergence of more variants. We have Delta right now. We could have 500 more by next year should we not get this thing under control. What we also know is that there's enough information available for Kyrie to have done whatever research he says he's going to do to acknowledge that this vaccine is safe and that it's effective. That's not what he's doing out here. I think that part of this is a mode of him trying to get attention. The other piece is him, and he's not the only black male athlete who has decided they don't want the vaccine. This is just a very convenient time to say it because you see conservatives and leading people on the right who are pushing against vaccine mandates for employees. It's frustrating because many of these are front-facing workers who definitely need to get the vaccine so they don't risk spreading COVID to their coworkers as well as the general public. But the other piece is that CEOs across the country actually wanted the vaccine mandates. This is something that came out of the White House that actually helped for many of these CEOs who were afraid and have seen violence amongst their staff particularly those who are, in the airline industry, who've seen people act a dang fool when it comes to masking and other things. It's very important that we take all of that into consideration, and that Kyrie Irving really takes responsibility for the ignorance that he's out here pushing, particularly when the Black community itself is the most affected by COVID-19 and COVID-19 death. This is very irresponsible. He knows better, so he should do better.
You know, it's interesting and if that's what he said, according to The Athletic, that he said, I want to be a voice for the voiceless. The anti-vaxxers are not voiceless. I see them everywhere.
They're loud.
They're loud. They're protesting. They're basically a voting bloc at this point. Let's even go further. The anti-vaccine mandate people are not voiceless. Lindsey Graham is against vaccine mandates. Ted Cruz is. If this is what he said, how are you a voice for the voiceless? They got a voice. They got a big voice. They're on planes harassing people. Exactly. They're going to restaurants assaulting people. They're into school. Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, is against vaccine mandates. They're not a voiceless group, Mr. Irving. What is going on?
Because it sounds good. It's a PR term. Yeah. But my thing is, where's Kyrie Irving for the people who are about to be homeless? The people who did not have extensions granted for their housing, the moratorium granted for their housing. What about those people who are the majority of Black women who are dying in maternal mortality? What about those who are Black men like himself who have the highest unemployment, 2 times the unemployment of white men across this country? Like, there's a voice for the voiceless, and there's an argument for that. He's in the wrong lane if he's trying to speak for the voiceless. These largely white people who decided that they don't want to get vaccinated and want to stand on, personal liberties or whatever the hell they decide to say at this point, those aren't voiceless individuals. Many of them are of a money class. Many of them are people whose voices get heard around the world. They have power and elitism in media, conservative media particularly. These are not voiceless individuals. He's chasing after the wrong crowd at this point. And anytime you hear Tucker Carlson and Fox News parroting you, and you have, these leaders on the right speaking up and, quoting your stance as a Black man, you're probably on the wrong side of history.
And I also want to remind people, this is so important. I don't really think of it as a vaccine mandate. Let's be clear. If it's 100 employees or less, you don't have to get vaccinated at all, right?
Because the majority of businesses in this country, the majority of businesses that people are employed in are small businesses.
Exactly. If it's 100 employees or more, you have to either get vaccinated or show a weekly negative COVID test. That to me sounds pretty flexible. Now, if you are a federal worker, yes, you have to be vaccinated. But as far as for the majority of the American public, that's not a mandate. This is not like some other countries where they're like, no, China, they're like, no, we don't got time for this bullshit. You got to do what you got to do. That's what you call a mandate. I don't know. That's not a mandate, Mr. Irving. It's not. It's 100 employees, and you could show a negative COVID test. And then sadly, what's happening all over the country, you've heard of this, Amisha, there are people who have bogus vaccine cards. Exactly. I mean, people are going to do what they want to do. This is not a voice for the voiceless, Mr. Irving. Like, what about being a team player? It just feels so petulant. It feels so lost. And somebody sent me a tweet saying that can't be true, that Kyrie Irving was a flat earther. Yeah, Amisha has facts. It's on the New York Times. Kyrie Irving doesn't know if the earth is round or flat. This happened in 2018. Yeah, he said that. He later apologized for it, but he said it. That is so, whatever. I'm not saying he's
taking their cues from public health from somebody who's not a public health expert, somebody who is not standing behind the study, somebody who's not leaning in on the science, somebody who is pushing this misinformation, who is causing all types of trouble literally amongst the community that he knows follows him. Black people, Black men specifically, but Black youth. They take a lot of their cues from our athletes, from that celebrity culture that comes from them. So when you have him out here pushing this type of information, it's hurtful because the positioning of those that are dying at the highest rates in this country from COVID-19 are Black people. So when you have a Black person who is standing up and parroting literally a lot of the information that's coming from right-wing media sets, you're injuring and creating harm to the Black community. He has to be more responsible with how he phrases these things and how he steps out in what he says, because it's not just him that is going to be hurt. He is literally signing the death warrant for a lot of Black people across this country who, like Nicki Minaj's crazy self a few weeks ago, came out and said something completely ignorant. And then you had African Americans literally protesting the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta.
Yes,
Basically
that
off of
happened. There was
something they
news
heard from a
footage.
rapper.
Yeah, and they had Nicki Minaj signs, and then Nicki Minaj was complaining that she was being canceled.
Lord.
Can I tell you, people say cancel culture, and they don't know what it means. And they say it like they say critical race theory. Let me make it really, really plain what cancel culture is. Cancel culture is when you do or say something and powerful people come after you and you lose your livelihood or you lose the work that you were doing before you were quote unquote canceled and you were basically banned or exiled, right? And that's not Nicki Minaj. That's not other people. Somebody who actually was canceled, who literally lost their work, lost what they loved to do because of what they said or what they did. That's Colin Kaepernick. Now, mind you, Colin Kaepernick is a rich, famous guy, so he's okay. But he has literally been banned, been canceled from the NFL. That's somebody who was canceled. So people say this term like cancel culture, not knowing what it means. That's a simple, make it plain definition. You do or say something, and people take away what you were doing before you said that something, and you are punished for it. It happened to Muhammad Ali when he didn't want to serve in the Vietnam War. He lost his boxing license. It happened to Lena Horne when she was speaking out against this country, and the FBI was tracking her. And it happened even worse to Paul Robeson when he was criticizing this country, and he could, I hate the term blacklisted, but for lack of a better term, he was blacklisted and wasn't allowed to work. That is cancel culture. It is not a pop star saying something and people throw some heat at you. If you still have your livelihood and you're bringing in millions and millions of dollars, that's not being canceled. People say these things, Amisha, they attach something to it. Critical race theory, cancel culture, defund the police, not knowing what any of this stuff means, just babbling it and attaching.
There has to be an economic and social net loss for you to be canceled. If you're still making money, if your music is still being streamed, if you're still able to, afford the multi-million-dollar mansions, you are not canceled. Cancellation, as in the examples that were just said, they limit your ability, one, to find work, to actually be able to have an audience, and you're silenced. That's what we're hearing now is people who just don't like the consequences of their actions, where they're getting pushback from individuals who are smarter than them, who recognize and call them out on their BS. That's not cancel culture. That's you getting corrected in real time.
Right. And then because you have so much fame, money, and power, you can choose to ignore it and you'll still be good. Look at R. Kelly. His streams have skyrocketed 500%. 500%. And what you saw with R. Kelly wasn't cancel culture. That was a scandal. That's different. That's an actual scandal with criminal behavior, right? But I don't know all the details of his finances. I don't know how much he's profiting from that, but skyrocketing 500%. This brother could be raking in money right now behind bars after being convicted of all those crimes.